Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's episode-by-episode review for Lost Season 3, Part 3. In this video, I will cover episode 17 through episode 23 of Season 3 of Lost. So this is Part 3 of my video, and this will go right up through the season finale for Season 3, Through the Looking Glass. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for the end of Season 3. If you haven't seen up to the end of Season 3, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. However, if you haven't seen beyond Season 3, then not to worry. I will not spoil anything that happens after Season 3. So you'll be safe from those kind of spoilers. But for those who have seen Lost up to the very end of the show, I will have a spoiler section at the end of the video, but I will give a proper spoiler warning before doing so. So this might be the best run of episodes in the entire show, in my opinion. I talked a lot about how Season 3 sort of meandered, had a lot of filler, and these final batches of episodes here that I'm about to get into were not. They were all like excellent, getting better one after another. Really great episodes, and I do get them because I talked before about how Lindelof and Carlton Cuse were purposely meandering to kind of piss off the producers because they wanted a specific end date, and it wasn't until right before the season finale aired that they announced that they had come to a deal with ABC for a specific end date. But I get the impression that they actually came to this deal way before, because this last batch of episodes, you get that they purposely stopped meandering and they felt like it had a purpose and they were driving towards something specifically. Now they did say that they sat down and they hammered out the over the summer after Season 3 that they hammered out like the rest of the show, but I think that's BS, but I'll get to that when I get it, or even if they did, they completely abandoned that idea, but the plan, but I'll get to that when I get to the later seasons. For this last batch, as I said, all excellent episodes, and you can tell that they were driving with a purpose, and they knew exactly what direction they wanted to go in and what they wanted to do, and that shows with these high quality episodes. So let's go ahead and jump into this, and let's start with episode 17, Catch-22. This, I think, is a really good gem of an underrated episode. I really love the island storyline, not so much the flashbacks. I think the flashbacks is what holds this back from being one of the great episodes, but I think it is very intriguing. First of all, I like the fact that it focuses on Desmond, Charlie, Hurley, and Jen, going out camping or whatever, or really it's all Desmond trying to set up the events that he thinks is going to bring Penny to the island. And I like that. I like how we're focused more on the, quote-unquote minor characters. You got Desmond, you got Charlie, you got Hurley, instead of always having it be about Locke, Jack, Kate, Sawyer, Saeed. You focus more on the characters that don't get as much screen time or interplay with each other. And I like that. And I think what they do, the storyline they tell with first, Desmond going with Hurley and saying that he's, has this mission, and he's like, oh, this is future stuff, isn't it? It's so hilarious when Desmond goes to get the first aid kit from Jack, and Hurley's just hanging around. It's like, can I help you, Hurley? It's like, nah, I'm just hanging out with Desmond because we're friends. And that was so funny. And Desmond's like, what the hell was that? Do you want him to get suspicious? And he's like, what? Suspicious of what? What are you talking about? So that was great. And then they convinced Jen to come, and then, of course, Charlie immediately is like, what kind of idiot do you take me for? You saw me die several times. And Desmond was like, nah, you're not going to die this time. Now, it's a very interesting quandary that they come up in this episode, that Desmond does see Charlie. And I love how for the first time this episode actually shows you what Desmond sees, because before we just hear him talk about it. It's interesting that that's how the episode starts, so you don't obviously know that this is just a vision, and then you see Charlie die, but then I thought it was pretty obvious that he wouldn't just kill Charlie off random, and we knew that Desmond keeps seeing him die, so I thought it was pretty obvious we were seeing what was Desmond saying. But they, flash back and they show that Charlie's still alive and well. But so I thought that was a really interesting choice, and it's an interesting sort of quandary that Desmond believes that if he lets Charlie die, then Penny will come to the island and save them, and he'll be reunited. And so he wants this more than anything, and so he's wrestling with this desire, to be with his lover again and to be rescued, as opposed to saving Charlie's life. And I love how he even said this, like, well, this is all pointless. It's I keep saving your life and you keep dying anyway. And I can get that point of view of how that would be really frustrating. But I do like when it came down to it, like, he just couldn't let it happen. He just couldn't. He wanted to let Charlie die. He just couldn't do it, which speaks a lot towards Desmond. And let me say, I love the fact that they signified that Charlie's death was coming. He had this suspenseful moment coming by having a conversation with Charlie and Hurley talking about Superman versus the Flash. That's a classic, silly argument that comic book geeks have been having for years, which I think is quite dumb, but it's funny, just how that was like the driving suspenseful key, and I love it. Like, you see that in the flashbacks, you hear the Superman, like, and they talk about that, and it was actually really effectively suspenseful. When they got to that actual scene, and then Hurley's like, "Oh, calm down, I'm not the Flash," and Charlie's like, "Oh, the Flash is deaf. Superman could kick his ass." And so as soon as they started talking about it, and then you can see Desmond picks up on this immediately as well. He's like, holy shit, this is the clue that something's bad. So they start talking about the Flash and Superman, so he realizes he's at the moment where Charlie's going to die, and he looks around and he sees the trap. And it's I just love how they chose that particular conversation or particular argument to have. And I actually think part of the reason why I don't like Superman is because he's too powerful. If you make too powerful of a character, it's not very interesting. The fact that he's faster than the Flash is a bit ridiculous. The Justice League movie established this later because the Flash was trying to outrun him, but Superman could actually see him in the and it's too much. It makes him. I know he has kryptonite, but still, it's like. So I think that whole argument's dumb anyway, but I love how they did it. Now I'm getting sidetracked about it all. But so that moment was great, and Charlie realizes, of course, after Desmond saves his life, that he knew all along that Charlie was going to die, and he was lying to him. But here's the thing. Desmond says that if he doesn't let events play out exactly how he saw them, then he's going to change the future and Penny might not come. And they actually get into this in the finale, but that's not actually how Mrs. Hawking described how time travel works. She said that everyone has a path, and they're going to go on that path regardless of what you try to do to change the past. Or change the path. It's not going to happen. Like she said, if I save that guy with red shoes, if I saved his life, he died the next day. And if I saved him then, he died the day after that. That he has a specific path, and that's to die. And that's what apparently the thing is with Charlie. Very much like Final Destination, that he has his destiny is to die. No matter what Desmond does, that's what's going to happen. So I don't really get how he's saying, "Oh, I have to do something specific. I have to let Charlie die, or this other thing's not going to happen." We know that's not Penny. We know it's Naomi. But if it was Penny's destiny to come to the island, then she would, regardless of what the hell Desmond does. If that's Mrs. Hawkins' reasoning. If someone is on a path, they're going to go through that path regardless of what you do. So if it was Penny's path to come to the island, then it doesn't matter if Desmond lets Charlie die or not. And so that's the part that, yeah, it seemed like he was just jumping to illogical conclusions there. But anyway, I thought that was a very great episode, island storyline wise. Anyway, flashbacks. These were definitely the worst Desmond flashbacks. This is the ones. I mean, I don't think they totally sucked, but it's kind of disappointing because this Desmond flashbacks fall victims to the season 3 flashback lull, where season 3 has a lot of useless, shitty flashbacks, and because Desmond's a new character, like the other characters who've been there since season 1, it's understandable because they just ran out of backstory for them. They don't really have anything, so they're just making like boring shit up, trying to force these flashbacks to happen when they really just ran out of ideas. But Desmond's a newer character. This is the first season where he's the main character, so there's still plenty of backstory. Like there's a backstory of how he got dishonorably discharged from the army, which was touched on in his first flashback. Give us that. That sounds interesting. But instead, you know, I get what they were trying to do. Like, these flashbacks are really boring. And plus, we don't need an origin story of why he calls people brother. I mean, the fact that he was with monks and they call everyone brother, that was, I rolled my eyes really hard at that one. We don't need an origin story of why he calls people brother. And also, like, I get what they were trying to do with this episode or with the flashbacks, is because they had a picture of that, priest dude with Eloise Hawking. And, the priest who comes up to Desmond, and Desmond thinks it's his destiny to go with them, so he ditches his fiancée, doesn't get married, instead goes to the priest. But then a couple weeks later, whatever, the priest kick him out and say, "Oh, you're fired, this is not where you're meant to be." And as soon as he gets fired, he goes and meets Penny and falls in love with her. So, I mean, the implication here, and especially seeing that the priest dude, or the monk, had a picture of him with Eloise Hawking, who was all about, the time travel destiny or whatever. There's some theories that they were like linked, and then that he was also sort of purposely guiding Desmond. But then again, we find out later Eloise Hawkins was somewhat related to or Charles Widmore, and Charles Widmore donated a lot of money to the monks. But anyway, so the idea is that it was Desmond, that the monk purposely interceded to put Desmond on the path of going to the island, because he was going to marry this other woman, but because of him he became a monk. And then from there he met Penny, and after he met Penny, that led him to go to prison. After going to prison, it led him to go on this boat race, and the boat race is what led him to go to the island to save everyone's life. So I think that's definitely where they're going for, is trying to say, that people were gently nudging Desmond for his destiny. But this is so like subtle that's it's kind of pointless, really, and it's not necessary. We don't really need to see, like, this is how people are pushing him to go here. So, I thought these flashbacks were really boring. But overall, I did really like this episode. I wouldn't say it's one of the best of the show, but it's definitely very good. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is DOC. And this is a more stronger case of an episode being split, where the island story is good and the flashbacks are bad. And the flashbacks in this episode are even worse than they were in fact, this is some of the worst flashbacks and the show has ever done. I know, like, I said this about the Anne Found, so I don't know if I could say the Sun Jin flashbacks are the worst, because Anne Found were really bad flashbacks as well. But here, these flashbacks were totally useless. This does remind me a lot of, like, certain prequels where they purposely say, "Aha, this is the origin of this," because the whole thing is, I think it ruins the Jen's father's character to see that the son actually met with him years before that scene in season 1 where we see Jen meeting with him. I think that's dumb. And also, like, son takes money needs to pay off Jen's mother for not ruining his life. So she asked her father for money, and he's like, well, I'm gonna, and she figures out that the money is for Jen. So it's like, well, I'm gonna take it out on him, and I'm gonna force him to pay it back. Which is, I hate that. That's bullshit. They're trying to make up the backstory of why he was forcing Jen to work for him and forcing him to beat people up. No, that's already explained. It's because that's why he let him marry Sun in the first place. This is sort of retroactively saying that, he actually let Jen marry Sun out of the goodness of his heart, and then later Sun pissed him off by asking for money. No, that's stupid. You had it right the first time. Just stop messing with shit. And it's kind of like the whole thing in the flashback in the Kate episode where the mother was like, if I see you again, I'm going to scream. No, that's not the origin of that. This is this show, and these flashbacks were just boring, waste of time. And plus, they didn't really fit with the present line. Like, the flashbacks they had in the episode Glass Ballerina, or even like something else having to do with the dude that Sun was cheating with, that would have been more appropriate flashbacks for this episode, because the whole episode was about who is the father of Sun's child, and she thinks it might be that other dude or Jen. So the flashback with the dude would have made a hell of a lot more sense. It would have fit together nicely. The flashbacks that they actually showed didn't have anything to do with the episode. It was just boring. But I did really like the island storyline. I love the storyline with Sun going to Juliet and them going to the hatch together, where she was going to determine who the father of her. And it was actually very touching, because she was like, Juliet said, if Jen was the father, then you're probably gonna die. And so she thought she was screwed either way, because if Jen was the father, she would die. But if Jen wasn't the father, that meant Jen wasn't the father. It was this other dude. So she was. So when she was told that Jen was the father, she was crying tears of joy because she was happy with Jen. That was such a touching moment. And it showed the rebuilding of the relationship and how much she actually does care for him now. I think this was a really nice sort of touch on Jen and Sun's journey. And the other storyline they had with them trying to heal Naomi, that was awesome as well. You have some funny early moments, like absolutely funny when Charlie and Desmond are arguing. Desmond's like, I'm going to run back, and Charlie's like, you can't, you're in the middle of nowhere. And Desmond's like, nobody knows we're here. And Hurley shoots off the flare right after he says that, and it's just like, oops. Like, this is a great moment. And then the whole thing with them encountering Mikhail just comes out of nowhere. I mean, this wasn't the most interesting thing ever, but I did enjoy the fact, again, that you get more play with minor characters. I enjoyed the fact seeing Jen kick Mikhail's ass and like chase after him, have the big showdown fight down. That was pretty awesome, I must say. So I did like that. So I think this was overall, I'd say it's a decent episode, because the island storyline is pretty strong, pretty good, but the flashbacks were god awful. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is The Brig. Now, this episode, a lot of people consider it one of the best of the show. I think my brother put this in the top 20, and I always kind of teetered it close to my top 20. I think I just got caught up in the minutia of everyone loving this episode, so I convinced myself that I love the episode too. And honestly, every time I watch it, I'm still really unsure how I feel about this. I can't tell if I do think it's one of the best episodes or if I don't. It's weird. I don't dislike this episode in any way, but I think if I think about it, I would have to say that it's not as good as everyone says it is. Because, okay, so it was very satisfying that we finally see Sawyer catch up to the real Sawyer, the man that he wanted to kill, and to kill him. This is something they teased since season 1, and the fact that it turned out to be Anthony Cooper, Locke's father, like, that was amazing. Again, it plays with this 6 degrees thing where people know people, and this is actually something that was hinted at. I think a lot of people had already figured this out before this episode aired. There was a scene back in season 2 where Locke was traveling with Sawyer, and he was like, he knew his name was James, and he's like, why did you choose Sawyer? And in fact, there was this bonus feature on this season 2 DVD which showed all of the 6 degrees connection. Like, you click on a wire and it would take you to the connection. It would see how those characters were connected, and you can keep flying through the wires, and they show like how the characters are connected through other characters in flashbacks. But this hasn't been revealed yet, so when you got to the Sawyer and Locke connection, they just showed you the scene where he's like, why did you choose Sawyer? And you're like, what the hell is that a connection? What the hell's going on? But I think that made it kind of obvious that the Sawyer, that the connection to him was that Anthony Cooper was the real Sawyer. But in this episode it's revealed Locke actually didn't know that, so it doesn't make sense. That it doesn't mean that when Locke was saying, why did you choose the name Sawyer, it sounds like he knew why, but apparently he didn't know why, so he was just saying that for the sake of saying it, so it actually wasn't a connection, but whatever. But I don't know. I think it was, so that was satisfying. It was interesting getting the interplay between Locke and Sawyer, and how Locke was saying, I want you to kill Ben, but took him to, Anthony Cooper instead, because he couldn't bear to do it, and he was trying to force him to do it, and to see the actual interactions between Anthony Cooper and Sawyer were interesting. But here's the thing. I think there's too much, like the whole thing about the magic box I still can't get over. And I think it's a bit too convenient that the Anthony Cooper, the real Sawyer, just happens to fall in Sawyer's lap, and he just kills them off right away. To me, that's not very, I don't know, there's something about that that's not very satisfying. That it doesn't feel earned. It feels like, here's a magic box, here he is, now he's dead. Although, again, I'm just really torn on this episode, because I did love the effect that it had on Sawyer, and how you could see that, and how he was just like, why did you make me do that? That was great. And the other thing is, like, you get the flashbacks of Locke, and he's with the others, and the others all love him, and you can tell, very obvious, that Ben is jealous, feels threatened by Locke, really, that he can see that Locke is becoming more popular than him, so he's threatening his power, and so Ben comes up with a way to humiliate Locke by taking him to Anthony Cooper and saying, kill him, and because he knows that Locke can't do it, and so that humiliates him. Okay, I have several issues with this, actually. First of all, the others, and Ben have said this repeatedly, we're not killers. We are not killers. We're not killers. We're not killers. And a lot of times people would just dismiss that as bullshit, because they've done a lot of nasty shit, especially with Ethan, snapping Scott's neck and breaking all the bones in his body. So you're not killers, really. But there's still ways to get beyond that, because you could say that Ethan sort of acted with that outside of the purview, and all the other times they attacked the camp, they took prisoners rather than actually killed anyone. I mean, you also get the thing with Danny wanting to kill Sawyer for no good reason, but, again, that could be an outlier. But here, they make it clear that it is bred into their policy, because they humiliate Locke, and they outcast him and say he's not worthy to lead them because he refuses to kill somebody in cold blood. So that totally fucks with their image of not being killers regardless. I mean, it's just beyond anything established in the show before, and it makes it so inconsistent, and plus it just feels silly. I'm going to shame you. He's not the man we thought he was. I'm like, that's silly. But and the other thing is, I don't buy that Locke is incapable of killing his father. I understand that he has this desire, this need to feel love, but I think when he's really put to the pressure, and he realizes his only way to get in with the others is to kill him, and I don't know, it seemed kind of like plot contrivance, the fact that he had to go get Sawyer to do it and that he couldn't do it himself. I think it would be easier for him to just do it himself, to go all the way back to camp and get Sawyer and bring him all the way back here and lock him up in the cell, whatever. I don't know. So, hard to say. I don't think this is top 20 material. I don't think this is one of the best episodes of the entire show, but it's still a very strong episode. It's still one I do enjoy watching. So I do say it's a good episode, but not a great one. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is The Man Behind the Curtain. Now, this was a groundbreaking episode because this is the first time we see back into the Dharma days when they're actually still around. And of course, we finally get a Ben flashback because he's been a main character for the whole season and they keep him around a lot, and this is the first time we actually see so get his backstory, and it's very comprehensive and it's very fascinating. And again, this episode also starts out with a fake out that they did with Juliet, where they show something where you think it's the island, like it's a reverse fake out of what they did in the premieres, where in season 2 premiere, season 3 premiere, they show what you think is the outside world, you think it's flashback, where really it's the island, and they do the reverse of that, where they show what you think is the island, but really it's the outside world. And so because the woman, Ben's parents are out hiking, and you find out, they come to the bird and they're just by Portland, and his mother dies in childbirth, and the father becomes an abusive dick, which was a very fascinating story, and I think it's amazing and how well it fits into Ben's backstory and the type of character that is slowly built into, like particularly get to the end where Ben, and especially oh my god, how abusive the father was on his son's birthday. Is like, well, it's hard for me to celebrate the day you killed your mother. I mean, really rough. So you totally get the sense of why Ben became the cretin that he became, and you see. And also, they teased the purge before, that the others wiped out the Dharma Initiative, and here you see it happen, that they used gas to just poison everyone and just walk on in. That was pretty powerful stuff. And of course, you also get the revelation in this episode that Richard Alpert doesn't age, because they go back to the 70s, where Richard Alpert's in his late 30s or 40s, early 40s, where we see him, and in the flashbacks, he's still exactly pretty much the same exact age. They didn't have a 10-year-old actor play him, or a teenager. So this is when we get the first hint. What's the deal with this guy? Why doesn't he age? What's going on? And I love how they were very subtle about it. They didn't sort of hammer this home. It's just something you sort of picked up on, which is very interesting. I love this sort of connect, because they connect to Ben as a kid, because he sees his dead mother. And I love how the first thing Richard Alpert asked is, did she die here on the island? Because I think that is important, because there seems to be a distinction between whether or not people can come back, see dead people. The body usually has to be there, like Jack sees his father in earlier seasons, and Mr. Echo sees his brother, and both their bodies were on the island. But with Ben's mother, she wasn't. Her body was nowhere near the island. So I get, and especially from Richard Alpert's reaction, I get the fact that he can see someone who didn't die on the island, or whose body wasn't on the island. That makes Ben even more special. And you see him later when he kills his father. It's had to be really patient. That was very powerful stuff. Now, the island storyline, I'll have to save most of my thoughts on this for the spoiler section, I'm afraid. And because a lot of what I think about the storyline has to do with how they follow up on this story, which I don't want to say. I'll wait till I get to the spoiler section. But suffice to say, I didn't like it as much. I think it was kind of weaker element, and the fact, and especially when Ben like shoots Locke at the end, uh, whatever. So, but I would still say this is a very, very good episode, very powerful episode. Anyway, let's get close to the end. Let's get into the penultimate episode, Greatest Hits, which I love this episode. Now, I've heard the opinion before that, okay, it's a good episode, but it's really just setup. It's really just setting up for the finale. But I disagree with that. First of all, I think the setup in this episode is almost more interesting than actually seeing what happens in the finale, as far as like the setup, because you get the whole interaction of Jack, and especially that opening scene where Jack takes him because they all thought, oh, they didn't trust Jack and Juliet or whatever, and there's a whole thing about the tape, and so he takes him to the tree and gets Rousseau out, and they blow it up, and he's like, the others are coming to capture pregnant women, but Juliet's going to mark the tent, but there will be no pregnant women there, and there's going to be a lot of what we just used at C4. We're going to blow them all to hell. I mean, that was a very exciting scene, very suspenseful, and the rest of the episode just builds off that, the whole thing about having Carl running, like they teased it earlier, and they have Carl running to warn them that they're coming, and they're trying to figure out who's going to stay behind, and then Charlie, alright, so this is the real thing, where Desmond goes to Charlie and says, I saw another vision of you dying, but this time I get a vision of Claire and her baby getting on a helicopter and leaving, and that's not going to happen unless you die. You have to die. So that's tied in, and you start to get the pieces of how, because Desmond said he was in a hatch that flooded, and then you get Saeed and Juliet talking about this hatch underwater, and so the pieces start to slowly fit together. But more than that, I think I do look at this as more of a standalone episode than just setup, because the character story, Charlie's character story in this episode is amazing. I mean, this is like a perfect send-off to Charlie, even though he doesn't die until the next episode. But this is like the next episode he's in the hatch with Desmond the whole time. But so this is the last time we see him interacting with the other people in the camp. Like you get the scene with him and Claire, which was very touching. And the scene with Hurley, where Hurley wants to go with them, and he's like, you can't fit in the boat, and Hurley's like, I'm cool, because that was such a great scene, because that Charlie was just saying that because he didn't want Hurley to come with him, because he knew he was going to die, and he didn't want Hurley to have to deal with that, so he just said something to get him to go away. But then he realized that's not what he wants his last words to Hurley to be. He doesn't want that to be the last memory Hurley has of him, so he hugs him and says, I love you. That was so good. That was so powerful. And plus, like the flashbacks, this was like very unique. Instead of just having old boring flashbacks, they did it in a different format, with Charlie writing down like the 5 like best moments of his life and giving that list to Claire, and so you see those 5 best moments happen, and it celebrates his life. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. It celebrates his life at the same time of leading to his impending death, and the fact that he's come to peace with the fact that he needs to sacrifice himself in order to save his friends, to save everyone. It was, that aspect of it, surely, yes, it's paid off in the next episode, but that aspect, again, you get the last interactions with him. This was more so Charlie's episode than the next episode is. So I actually do think this is one of the greatest episodes of the show. I love it. I think it was very good, very powerful. Anyway, let us go ahead and get into the big finale, and I will cover both parts as one because it aired as a two-hour special, so that's how I'll look at it. Through the Looking Glass. Whew, man, so many people say that this is the best episode of this show, and I'm not entirely sure if I disagree with that. It's a very strong contender in my mind. I'm not sure exactly where I would fall by the end of it, but I definitely see why because this episode has everything. I mean, I always think of that music, the adventure music that's been around since the very pilot episode, but this episode I think really made it its own, like the you know the one I'm talking about. That's what I think about every time, because you have this. I think is better at like splitting up the main characters into groups, but making each of those different storylines very interesting. I mean, you got Bernard, Jen and Saeed staying back trying to kill the others, and they kill most of them, but they don't get all of them. They get captured, and they got Jack leading everyone else up to the radio tower, and then Sawyer and Juliet wants to go off and do their own thing. You got Charlie and her and Desmond and down in the hatch doing their thing. Like it was all kind of came together like very. It's a very strong adventure story, but we get some of the best moments, and I think I've played this clip before to illustrate that I think Benjamin Linus is the best villain in all of television. I stick by that, and because you had this scene, which I think is one of the most powerful, most well done scenes in all of television, where Ben, approaches Jack with the walkie and tries to talk him into giving up to the satellite phone and not trying to get rescued, and how he threatens to kill the three people back at camp. And as far as Jack knows, Ben's going to do it, and he has no reason to doubt him. And I actually think it's a bit inconsistent that Ben didn't do it, but plot convenience and all that. But I do think it works, because that was such powerful scene where Ben was counting down 60 seconds and was saying, why do you want to go back so badly? There's nothing back there for you. He's trying to convince Jack to stay on the island, and this is something that Jack is fighting and saying, no, I'm not going to do it. And Jack staying true to the kind of stubborn character he is, which I love, because it sets him apart from most other hero stereotypes, would just be like, okay, I give in, don't kill him. But Jack is just like, lets them die, and he hears the gunshot wound, the gunshots go off, which he thinks are killing them, and you can see it on his face, like, ugh, like it was so painful to him. And just the way that Ben was very smugly, it's like, I'm so sorry, Jack. And then Jack starts to beat the ever loving shit out of him. I mean, that was such a good, powerful scene, and I don't think it is undermined in the least by the fact that they didn't actually kill the people. And it was such a great, like, get up and cheer moment where Hurley comes in with the van and saves the day after everyone just saying that he couldn't help, or wouldn't be a help, and he came in and saved the day, and he was talking to Jack. He's like, I saved them, and he told them that they were still alive, and such great moment. And of course you get Alex Rousseau finally meeting up with her daughter after all this time, and then going to the radio tower, and then the Charlie and Desmond stuff. I mean, that was pretty great as well. It was pretty suspenseful, with Charlie getting tortured and Desmond having to chase in, and Mikhail coming. I have a few issues of why Ben sent Mikhail there in the first place. Why did he need to kill Bonnie and what's-her-face, and why not just tell them to kill Charlie? And I don't know, but whatever. And the fact that Mikhail's like invincible. Yeah, I mean, he was thrown into the fence and yet survived that, and then he gets shot by a harpoon and yet survives that. I mean, that's it. And then why did Mikhail just go with the grenade and why and kill himself just to kill Charlie? I don't know. Maybe he knew he was dying. I don't know. It just seemed silly how they made Mikhail a bit invincible. And when a lot of times people challenge Damon Lindelof and others on this, and they would just be like, well, he's a Russian. Russians are made out of pretty stern stuff. Translation, it was plot convenience. It was convenient for the plot. And so that's why he managed to not die. It wasn't the magic of the island or anything like that. Although a lot of times when people use that term, it is also plot convenience. But this time it was definitely plot convenience. But it was still a really great episode. And it was great, even though it was a bit silly that in order to unlock the code, it had to be done by a musician, and so that makes it clear that Charlie had to be there, because if it was anyone else there, they're not a musician, they probably wouldn't have been able to figure out the code as much as Charlie was, which is a bit, I don't know, but I kind of like it. But Charlie's death, man, I must say, I think this is the best television death ever. It was the most powerful. It sort of brings tears to my eyes. I don't know anyone who could watch this without crying. It was so good. Just the whole way it was done. Now, I know some people will argue that, it didn't make sense for Charlie to kill himself because he could have easily ran out the door and shut it behind him, and thus closing the compartment so he didn't die. But people who say that forget the fact that he was told that he needs to die in order for his friend to be rescued. In order for Claire and her baby to be rescued, he needs to die. So if he did do that, if he ran out the door and shut it behind him, then as far as he's concerned, he just blew their chances to get rescued. But that is specious reasoning, has specious reasoning, as I explained before, that I think Desmond was sort of taking a leap of logic. He has no reason to actually believe that if he fails to do something, or someone fails to die, then that will have an adverse effect of how other things happen, because, as I said, it's not how Mrs. Hawking described things. That's not how time works. She described it as it's someone's destiny. Someone has a path. They're on that path regardless of anything you do. So it seems like Charlie could have simply, although if we stick to the Mrs. Hawking things, that just means he would die some other way eventually. So what's the point? And I can get that from Charlie's perspective, because he, as far as he knows, there's no way to get out of him dying. That he is going to die. Like, all these things just keep trying to kill him. So why not die saving his friends? Why not go out, die a hero's death? And this is his opportunity to do that. So no, I don't think it's inconsistency that Charlie just didn't run out and save his life, because he didn't want to, for all the reasons I just stated. And so I did think it was really powerful. I mean, the whole not Penny's boat thing, that's a classic. I mean, and like just the conversation that Charlie had with Penny and her learning that Desmond was still alive, I mean, that was touching. I mean, this is just so powerful, so many levels, and the life and death music have never been more powerful than in this scene where Charlie's dying and Desmond's on the other side. With a lot of people make comparisons to Star Trek 2, and maybe that was an inspiration, but I think it's different enough to not be considered a ripoff, where he's touching hands against a glass and Charlie can't do anything and Desmond has to sit there and watch Charlie die. It was so sad. But what I think is the saddest part of this scene was not Charlie's death itself, but when after his death, they go to Claire and Aaron starts crying immediately, and Claire's like, oh, I have no idea why he's crying. But we, the audience, know that he's crying because Charlie just died. And again, this is them saying that there's magic on the island or whatever, and people have these abilities, and that Aaron could somehow sense that Charlie was dying. That's what gets me. That's actually what makes me cry more than Charlie's death itself. Like, that gets me teary-eyed. But as soon as they show Aaron and Naomi goes up to Claire and is like, oh, what's your boyfriend's name? Oh, Charlie. Charlie's just got us rescued. And they cheer. That's what gets to me. That whole is the best television death ever, in my opinion. Definitely. But now, oh my God, see, if all this praise I'm heaping on it wasn't enough, let me get into the flashbacks. If you've seen the end, otherwise you shouldn't be watching this video, they're actually flash forwards. They're not flashbacks. Now, this was, I think, again, a classic moment. I think it was a great, bait and switch. I love the fact how they didn't reveal that big reveal at the end where this is the future. And because the first time I saw this episode, I thought these flashbacks are boring. Because, I don't know, not more boring, Jack flashbacks, and oh, he's depressed and wanting to kill himself. Why do I care about this? And what does any of this have to do with anything? Why is this tied to what's happening on the island? But when you learn that actually flash forwards, it totally justifies, because the whole time Jack is he's upset. He's like suicidal. He's become like a drug addict. And see, when you think of their flashbacks, you think, oh, he's just upset over, his divorce and why they've already did an episode of this. Is a bit repetitive. You find out that's not why. It's because he wants to go back to the island. It's because he regrets leaving the island, and that's what makes it so powerful. And this episode is even better to watch after, like second or third time, after you know the twist, because you can pick up on when they go between the Jack and the island, Jack and the flash forwards. And the actor himself said it was very hard to portray, do this episode, because it was so emotional for him, having to go into these very strong emotions. And on the island storyline, you have Jack, his whole desire was to get rescued and to leave the island. That was his main focus, his main goal. And as I said, he was willing to let people die in order to do that. And he beat the ever-loving shit out of Ben in order to do that. When Locke threatened to kill him, he's like, go ahead and kill me. I'm not giving down. Like, he wanted off the island more than anything in the world. And to find out that you're intercutting the scenes of him wanting to leave the island more than anything in the world with this future where he has been off the island for 3 years, we learn. This is the flash forward to 3 years in the future. And he desperately regrets it more than anything. And that's why that scene at the end is so powerful. Not just for the fact that, hey, it's in the future the whole time. It's the fact that he meets with Kate and says, we were never supposed to leave. And that's why he's depressed. That's why he's so upset. That's why he's suicidal. That's why he become a drug addict. Is because... And so to get that contrast between that is just so amazing. And it's one of the best moments in all of television. The whole, we have to go back, Kate. We have to go back. I mean, that is a classic moment. I think people who never even seen the show had seen or heard that line. Because it's a classic line in television. I'll often say that. I used to say that to people when if I forgot something at the grocery store, and definitely still need it, so I have to go back to get out of it. Like, I have to go back. I have to go back. But that was just, it was just so good. Such an amazing episode. I can't even say it. Yes, this may be the best episode of the entire show. It is an amazing 2 hours of television all around. It's just spectacular in every way. Anyway, so those are all the episodes of season 3 now. So as is traditional, for once I finish the season, I'm going to name my top 3 least favorite episodes of the season and my top 3 favorite episodes of the season. So let's start with my least favorite episodes of the season. And so let's do 3 through 1. Let's start with my number 3, which I do believe is going to have to be Left Behind, which is a very pointless, filler, boring episode. The flashbacks with Kate, as I said, were silly when she's like, her mom's like, oh, if I see you again, I'm going to yell. No, that's not why she yelled. She yelled because she was terrified. I mean, it was kind of interesting, Kate meeting Cassidy, but that's the only saving grace in this episode. And the island storyline of the hot girl-on-girl action where Juliet and Kate are mother wrestling after, getting handcuffs, blue, 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 blah, 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 blah. And so, my number 2 worst episode of season 3 would be Further Instructions. This episode is only saved slightly because of that cool dream sequence with Boom, but if you exclude that, the whole thing with The flashbacks were total waste of time. First of all, the whole, Locke being in this commune, total definition of filler. It adds nothing to nothing. It's just a complete and utter waste of time. And the island story itself was really stupid. Again, treating the polar bears like monsters, where they kidnap Echo and Locke has to save them just so Echo can die a couple days later. I mean, this episode sucks. So, let me now get into my number one worst episode of season 3, and this should be obvious. Obviously, it's going to be Stranger in a Stranger Land, which may well, in fact, be the worst episode of the entire show. This episode angers me. If you've seen my review of it, I couldn't help but yell. I'll try not to do that now, but it's just so bad as the flashbacks and the island story. The island story sucks to introduce characters. Isabel just disappears, and the producers all said in the bonus DVDs that she died, but she never died. She's a waste of time. And the whole, it's Mark Juliet, and that never comes back. The whole fucking thing is a waste of time. The flashbacks are definitely the worst part of the episode. When we find out what happened to Jack's tattoos when nobody gives a flying rat's ass how Jack got his tattoos, and the way they tried to do, you're a leader, this mysterious, blah, 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 is the most contrived bullshit that I've ever seen in an episode. This episode is a giant piece of shit. Anyway, I'm getting angry. So, let me move on to happier times. Let's talk about the top 3 best episodes of Lost Season 3, which this is pretty hard to do because there were a lot of great episodes in Season 3. But I think I had to boil it down to 3. Number 3 best episode of Season 3 is going to be Greatest Hits. As I said, I love this episode. I don't think it's just set up. I think it was a very powerful, emotional story with Charlie. I think having the flashbacks showing the best moments of his life as he knew he was going to die, and he was saying his goodbyes to Claire, leaving the ring behind. It was just, and the setup itself was so suspenseful, so powerful. I mean, this episode was just amazing. It's everything you want out of a penultimate episode. And my number 2 best episode of Season 3 is Flashes Before Your Eyes. Another amazing Desmond episode. Great time travel episode. Very emotional, very creepy in that way that only Lost can do, where Mrs. Hawkins really, tries to tell him that he can't change the past, that he has to go to the island, that's his destiny, it doesn't matter what he tries to do, and to see that the regret in Desmond at the end, when he's like, let me go back, I can change it, like, nothing can be more powerful than that, and it's just an all-around very good, very powerful episode. So now, let me get into my number 1 best episode of Season 3, and if you haven't guessed it not yet, you should have. It's Through the Looking Glass. I was just talking about this episode. This episode, again, may be the best episode of the entire show. It has everything you could possibly want. It has adventure, it has twists, it has turns, it has emotional, like everything. It has Charlie's death, it has the big reveal that Jack wants to go back to the island 3 years in the future, that leaving was a mistake, and in the present time you see him like beating Ben to a bloody pulp. This episode is just simply amazing. And now let me give my rating for Season 3 as a whole out of 10, and I will give Season 3 a 9. Excellent. As I said, every time I give a rating to a season overall, I keep in mind that there's no such thing as a perfect season, and I have to sort of rate it on that sort of curve, that every season has its down points. And the high points of Season 3 do make me want to give it a 10, particularly Through the Looking Glass, Greatest Hits, and Flashes Before Your Eyes, and the other, like towards the end, there was just one good episode after another. But, as I said, there's just way too much filler in this episode, particularly in the first half of the season. The writers obviously didn't really, as I said, they were purposely spinning their wheels to piss the producers off, which is a mistake, and it ultimately hurt the season. But there was enough in here, I think, that still made the season excellent. As I said, I don't agree with those who say the season sucked or it is one of the worst seasons because of that, because I think there's just too much good in the season. There's a lot of the season is the writers like really advancing the story more and advancing the quality, building off of what they did before. It's a shame they had to have all that filler in. Anyway, that is it for my spoiler-free section of my coverage of Season 3 of Lost Part 3. Thank you so much for watching. In 2 weeks, I'll be back with my How I Would Write Season 3 of Lost, which continues off of my sort of fan fiction version of how I would do a reboot of Lost. However, that video will contain spoilers up to the end of the show. So if you haven't seen up to the end of the show, you probably want to skip that video. And I'll be back in a month, roughly, to start my coverage of Season 4. So be sure to check that out. Also check out my channel, as I do many other videos on other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching. Okay, but if you have seen Lost all the way up to the very end, to the last episode of Season 6, please continue onward as I get into my spoiler section, which will begin thusly. Anyway, so we start with Catch-22, and I don't really have much to say about Catch-22 except, like, you get when Season 4 they try to intercut Naomi, like, before coming to the island, where like Miles or someone was like, oh, why are you going to the island? And she's like, that's neat to know and you don't. But I think that's just an excuse because the writers had no logical explanation of why was she going to the island by herself, especially when we learn later she gets together this group of 4 specialist scientists, especially to go to the island. She's supposed to, and we see this flashback where what's his face, Matthew Abaddon, was like supposed to say, oh, you have to chauffeur them, make sure nothing happens to them. And yeah, she goes off on her own. Her helicopter crashes and she dies before they even get there. So I don't know. I definitely think the writers are most certainly winging it, and they didn't thought up of any of this, so they try to retroactively make it fit, and it doesn't really fit, so they're just like, yeah, whatever. But anyway, let me get into the next episode, which is DOC, which I gotta talk about this powerful sun flashback. No, just kidding, those flashbacks were dumb. I guess, I don't know. Oh, I know what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the super sperm. I think the super sperm is stupid. I'm sorry. I think that's a dumb storyline. Because, Juliet explains that, men that are more potent or whatever and pretty much guaranteed to get you pregnant. Then how come, like, half the women on the island should have been pregnant by now? I'm sorry, especially Kate. Slut. No, I'm just kidding. But really, why? And people should be a lot less especially the others should be a lot less cavalier about sex, like you see in future episodes, Juliet having an affair with a good one, but they must be using some pretty damn good protection and contraceptive if being pregnant is a freaking death sentence, and they have super sperm to guarantee that you get pregnant. I mean, I don't know. Some people hated the whole, storyline about the baby, dying in childbirth or whatever. I didn't hate it, but I don't like the super sperm. Could have done without that. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is The Brig. So there is this DVD extra where you saw them in the writer's room coming up with the idea for this episode, and they mentioned Claire's psychic at that dude, that he was, like, they were throwing around the idea that he was there in the Brig with Anthony Cooper. That's fucking weird. And so seeing that made me think that they were going to do something with Claire's psychic, but of course they never actually did. So I don't know. It seems like they had some better ideas about it. And I already talked about in the previous video how I think it's kind of dumb how Anthony Cooper just magicked the whole magic box thing. I wish they would have just came up with a better explanation of why it was there. It would make me like this episode better, quite frankly. But, anywho, let's get into the next episode, which is the man behind the curtain. Now, so much to say about this episode. So, alright, Jacob. Let's start with Jacob. This, and because I said in my spoiler free that I couldn't really get into why I didn't like this episode as much as I used to. And it's because in retrospect, how they established Jacob in this episode was absolutely totally inconsistent with how he will appear later in the series. And it's obvious that from later in the series that they had no idea who Jacob was or what they were doing, and they completely changed their minds about what they wanted to do with Jacob. Now they try to keep some things, like they established like the circle of ash around the cabin, but because later the ash was to keep the smoke monster out, because apparently the smoke monster couldn't walk through the ash. But later in season 5 they say that the circle's broken, someone broke the ash, and so someone else has been using the cabin. And then in season 4 is even more inconsistent because the cabin appears and reappears, which is not how it's established in this episode. But let me get to the heart and bones of this. Let me get to the heart of the matter here. The scene where Ben goes into the cabin and is talking, it reminds me, he's freaking being Clint Eastwood talking to an empty chair. Of course the Clint Eastwood thing was years after this episode came out, but watching in retrospect I was like, hey, it's Clint Eastwood. But anyway, he's talking to an empty chair, and it's obvious from watching this, that their intention when they wrote and filmed this episode was that actually was Jacob. Now later, in season 6, they changed their minds, so they had Ben said, I was just putting on a show for you, Locke, which is the biggest load of inconsistent bullshit that I've ever seen, and it doesn't match up in any way, shape, or form. Watch this scene in particular, so Ben, if he was just putting on the show, if you watch the scene in particular, when Jacob starts freaking out, Ben goes to the chair, grabs it, and says, "Enough, Jacob!" And then Locke can actually see a man, a flash of a man sitting in the chair. And also when Jacob starts because when Locke puts on the flashlight, which Ben told him not to do, by the way, is when Jacob starts freaking out and making shit throw around. And you look at Ben's reaction; he's not the least bit startled or surprised. Now, if what we learn later on in the series is true, that Ben was just putting on a show, he not only should have been surprised, he should have been shocked as hell, because he was going to put on, because he even said, I was just as surprised as you were, and stuff started flying around the room. I'm sorry, no you weren't. You totally were not. That is the biggest load of bullshit. You watch the scene in particular. If he was putting on a show for John and was like, I'll take you to this fake cabin and just put on the show, and then all of a sudden shit started flying around saying that there actually was a supernatural element involved when he was just pretending or lying that there was, and it actually turned out to be the case, that would have freaked him the fuck out. Act or no, lie or no one, not even Ben, is that good of an actor where he would be able to hide his momentary surprise. I mean, maybe he'd have a moment of shock, but he'd get over it quickly, and the fact that he went to the chair and was yelling at Jacob, that obviously was someone who believed there was someone sitting in that chair, not someone putting on the show, especially when it's implied there is someone sitting in the chair, because you see flashes of a dude sitting in the chair. So that is total and complete and utter BS. That's what they do, and here's why. You might say, well, why are you holding that against this episode? It's because this episode is so dependent on setting up Jacob. So the fact that, and that's why I like this episode at first, because it's established having the whole voice going, help me, is setting up a storyline of Jacob asking for John's help, which he never does. That never comes the case. You find out it's just Jacob manipulating John come to the island. And there's so many issues with this, but I'll get to that more in season 6. So it hurts this episode because all this setup turns to be for nothing. It turns to be false. It turns to be inconsistent. And it's actually, I don't like, I get a bit, it's, frustrated watching this episode in retrospect, seeing how they completely and utterly ruined, what they did with this. But anyway, let me go ahead and move on to the greatest hits. Now I kind of mentioned the most inconsistent, another huge inconsistent. If you see this episode, Desmond tells him about the vision that Charlie tells him the vision of him dying. He specifically says, I see Claire and her baby, they get in a helicopter, it takes off, leaves the island. Yet that doesn't happen. And I, again, am entirely certain that at this point in time, the writers didn't know that wasn't going to happen. They probably thought that would happen, and they didn't change their minds about there only being oceanic sex and Claire not being one of them. They didn't decide that until later. I will fight anyone tooth and nail about that. I think it's obvious. This is completely, and a lot of people brought it up. Now, you can't come up with some fan-splaining explanations to try to be like, well, the reason why Claire didn't get in the helicopter is because the events happened a bit differently. And so that changed the outcome, so that made it so Claire couldn't leave the island. And as I said, if it was Claire's, this is not how time travel's been established in the show. The way it's been established, Claire's on her path. If it's her path to leave the island, then she'll leave the island. If it's her path to stay on the island, then she'll stay on the island. It doesn't matter what the fuck Desmond or any other time traveling or people who can see the future do, because they cannot change the past. Whatever happened, happened. And everyone has their destiny. So it's either Claire's destiny to leave the island or it isn't. So there's no way that Desmond could have a vision of her leaving the island if that wasn't her destiny. So this is complete and utter cocky, mainly bullshit, inconsistent. Anyway, let's get into Through the Looking Glass. So let's talk about these flash forwards. Now, I do love these to death, and I heard the opinion that some people actually hate this and thought it was the jumping the shark moment, the worst part of the show, which I could not disagree with more. I thought these were amazing. But I heard the opinion that some people just couldn't buy, because of course we find out who's really in the coffin, whose death caused Jack to be suicidal and to go crazy, and is John Locke. And I heard the opinion that, like, well, that's stupid, because he doesn't even like John Locke. And we see him in this episode threatening to kill him, like the season 4 premiere. He actually tries to kill him, and they were always enemies. They never got along. But I think anyone who says that is missing the freaking point. The whole point is that Jack has changed his mind and realized that Locke was right the whole time, and that they should have gone back to the island. And Locke comes to Jack, as we'll see in season 5 with the life and death of Jeremy Bentham, and begs him to come back to the island, but Jack refuses to do it, and the next thing he knows, Locke is dead. And most definitely he blames himself for Locke's death, and he realizes that he should have listened to him, and he feels responsible for his death. So he can't get back to the island as much as he wants to. He goes on plane after plane after plane, and he just can't get back. And so he realized that John would have been able to help him get back if he took him up on the offer, but he ruined it. And because of that, a good man who was actually right the whole time, regardless of any feuds they had in the past, he realized that Locke was right the whole time, and all of his other friends that they left behind were going to die, and it's his fault. So he wants to commit suicide. I think that makes the most sense in the world. I think that is entirely consistent with the character. And further, I think it's awesome. Now, the one thing I will say, though, is, and I'll get to this when I get to season 4 more, is that they could have done a better job showing Jack's transformation from the island storyline in this episode, where he's like, I have to get off the island, fuck anyone else who tries to stop or rescue, to, I desperately have to get back. I think, because that is a huge shift, and I think the episode Something Nice Back Home attempts to show the shift, but I don't think it did enough. I think because that's such a drastic shift that we needed to actually see more. I mean, we did see Jack slowly starting to go a bit crazy and insane, but I think we needed more. Need more. But other than that, I absolutely loved it. And of course, you have other, minor mysteries like set up in this episode, which is great because you had the whole thing of the funeral, who's in the coffin, of course, find out it's Locke, which again, completely, I believe that they knew it was going to be Locke the whole time, personally. I think it fits, and that's why when they called Kate, she was like, why would I go to the funeral? Which I love. So I think they knew, actually. I'll give the writers the benefit of the doubt on this one. And also when Kate says, he'll be waiting, I better get back, he'll be waiting. Like when this first came out, everyone was like, who's the he? Is it Sawyer? Everyone was thinking Sawyer, but no, it's Aaron, because she's raising him. So that's a powerful revelation. Anyway, that was absolutely amazing. So anyway, that is all I have for spoilers. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to come back here in 2 weeks for how I would write season 3 of Lost. Take care.